So again, welcome. You are all very welcome here to listen to the Buddha's teaching, to listen to the Buddha Dharma, to listen to this very precious, this very important teaching. This is perhaps one of the most important of the entire, sutras, the entire teachings of the Buddha. I would say that the Diamond Sutra is probably one of the most important. There are many people, there have been many practitioners, many masters over time that have actually said that in truth, this is the only sutra, if you could say like this, that in truth, this is the only sutra, that only this contains everything. The entire wisdom of the Buddha is here, that this sutra itself is the Buddha, actually. And I think we talked a little bit about it last time. Today or tomorrow, we will go a bit deeper into that again. So today will be quite challenging, I think. Today will be really, these next few chapters are quite a mind twist, but it's very important to really overcome all kinds of limitations we have about the idea of what is the Dharma, what is the Buddha, what is the actual teaching of the Dharma. So today we are going to start with chapter 6. Again, I hope everyone has followed so far the first 5 chapters. So chapter 6, in this version, the title is called Proper Faith is Rare. As I explained before on the last time, the chapter titles are not part of the original sutra. The chapter titles were added later. And there's a few different versions. There's a few different versions from different people over history, and the titles vary sometimes a little bit. But in any case, it doesn't really matter. So we start here. Subhuti addressed the Buddha. World-honored one, in the future, will there be living beings who truly believe upon hearing such phrases? The Buddha told Subhuti, do not say that. In the last 500 years, after the Tathagata's cessation, there will be those who, holding the moral precepts and cultivating blessings, will believe such phrases and accept them as true. So, of course, Subhuti here is talking about what just happened. So, the conversation that he just had with the Buddha over the first 5 chapters. So, Subhuti is wondering, will anyone believe this? Will anyone come to actually trust these words, especially later in the future? So here it is speaking about, in the Buddha says, do not say that. In the last 500 years after the Tathagata's cessation, there will be those. So this is a very important point, actually, and we need to talk a little bit about this. So there's 2 things here to understand. As this chapter is actually very important, which establishes how come we can understand, how come we can come to realize this that the Buddha has introduced so far. As I said before in the last teaching, the first 5 chapters, they're really the core of this sutra. And now we start to unfold different aspects of it. And this is the first one, is how can we come to understand this wisdom, to realize this wisdom, to discover this wisdom, to truly, fully come to this discovery. So first thing to come to notice here is, so do not say that in the last 500 years after the Tathagata's cessation. So this is referring to what is normally called, the end times, or the latter day of the Buddha's teaching. Sometimes it's also called the generated times. In this particular translation, in this particular sutra, they are referring to the last 500 years as referring to the last 500 years that the Buddha Dharma exists in this world. So I wanted to clarify a little bit about this because I feel there's a lot of misunderstandings sometimes about this topic. And we hear again and again and again and again today that, you know, we live in these degenerated times, we are in these degenerated times, and da. I wanted to clarify this a little bit. First of all, we have to understand that people have been saying we are in the degenerated times already for 1,000 years. Already 1,000 years ago, they were saying we were in the degenerated times, and the Buddha Dharma is still here. So this is not so simple. There is not so simple for two reasons. First, because the way to count time, the way to measure time, as it was referred in the time of the Buddha, in the time of these sutras, is not so straightforward to understand. There are some sutras or some translations, some interpretations, that instead of 500 years, they actually list 1,000 years. So in some teachings, they say that each period is 500 years or 1,000 years. So it's quite a big difference. So we're talking quite a big difference. And there's not much agreement upon that, if it's 500 years or 1,000 years. In any case, there's another issue, which is the number of periods. So traditionally, in some sutras and in some traditions, they speak about three periods, three sections. So with each, the first period, which is immediately after the Buddha's passing, first period. And then there's the second period, which is the intermediary, and finally the last one, which is the tail end, like this. But not all traditions agree with this. There are traditions, many Buddhist traditions, and in some sutras, they speak about 5 periods, not 3. 5 periods they talk about. And also in terms of time is also quite different. So for example, in some traditions that rely on some of the old sutras, they speak about these periods in 5 sections. So according to these traditions, the tail end of the Buddha Dharma would actually be somewhere in the beginning or mid of the 22nd century. So still quite far from now. Theravada Buddhism, for example, just for the ones of you that are curious, Theravada Buddhism holds actually that the Buddhist teachings will decline in 5,000 years. 5,000 years, the Buddhist teachings will decline. You see, this is not, there's no consensus, okay? There's really no consensus. Because the Buddhist teachings on this topic is not clear, and it is not clear in many fronts. So there is several references, which is natural to a kind of a beginning period, a golden age, and a kind of a decline, which is natural because everything is impermanent. But as to the exact, times of how that happens, there's no agreement, okay? Many different Buddhist traditions and many different people over the centuries and masters have disagreed upon this. And very curiously enough, for example, Dogen. So Dogen, the founder of Soto Zen, I'm not sure if you're aware. So Dogen, for example, about this topic, he didn't put much value at all, actually, in this Dharma ending age. From Dogen's point of view, the Dharma ending age was a skillful mean. It was not something to be taken in any literal sense. And he based himself on several sources to make that decision. And for example, that the Buddha had delegated to certain bodhisattvas the task of upholding the Dharma all the way through until the appearance of the next Buddha. And actually, indirectly, this is what the Buddha is saying right here. When he says, do not say that in the last 500 years after the Tathagata cessation, there will still be those who are holding the precepts, cultivating the blessings, and they will understand, they will believe, they will accept these teachings as true. So the Buddha himself here is saying, don't get too hung up on this, apocalyptic kind of views, because it's not that simple. It's not that simple. So, for example, in the case of Dogen defended that. Dogen was of the opinion that even though it was possible that the Dharma teachings would get to a point that they would be so degenerated that they could end, but from his point of view, that was not inevitable. That was not inevitable. It was preventable. That could be prevented. And according to Dogen, it was the task of the bodhisattvas, it was the task of the arhats, it was the task of the practitioners. It's our job. Really, it's our job. It's our job. It depends on us, it depends on the bodhisattvas, it depends on the Aryas, on the awakened beings, it depends on all of us if the Dharma ends or not. It truly, I think, this was Dogen's position, and I share very much that idea, actually. I say many times to people, when people say, we are on the latter days, we are in the degenerated ending time. And I say, no, we're not. Even because, according to the Buddha's own explanation of this, if we look at what means this ending period, according to the ending period, so according to the periods, it would be something like, in the beginning, it would be very easy to attain liberation. So in the first period, it would be very easy. The practitioners would be very diligent, very high capacity. They could practice and they could attain liberation very easily. And then as things decay, then things will shift to becoming more and more superficial. At some point, more focus on philosophy, conceptuality. At some point, it's just some kind of worship. At some point, it's just some kind of outer form. And eventually, it's just books on a shelf. And eventually, it's just statues. And eventually, it's just history. So in very simplistic terms, that would be like the thing. But the fact of the matter is that today, still in our times, the Dharma is alive. The Dharma is not a shadow. There are beings that are awakening. There are beings that are discovering their natures. There are beings that are discovering their intrinsic nature. And there are beings that are becoming fully awakened still today. So clearly we are not in the degenerated times. Okay, we have not reached that point yet. And if we reach or not depends on all of us. It really does. That's really the main point here. And that's also what the Buddha is saying. There will be those who will uphold the teachings. So, and then it continues. The Buddha says, you should know that such people have not planted good roots with just one Buddha, 2 Buddhas, 3 Buddhas, 4 or 5 Buddhas, but they have planted good roots at the places of immeasurable tens of millions of Buddhas. The Tathagata knows and sees all people who hear these phrases, Subhuti, and even a single thought of pure faith. Such living beings will thus obtain immeasurable blessings and virtues. So the Buddha here is saying that the people that hear this, maybe they don't understand this kind of teaching, the teaching that is in this sutra. Maybe they won't understand immediately. But they will go like, wait, this is profound. This is profound wisdom. They recognize something there. Some of higher capacity, maybe they will understand something. And maybe some will completely awaken, just listening to this sutra. Like, for example, is the example of the Chinese master Huineng, the 6th patriarch of Chan. Huineng, he completely attained total awakening just when he heard this sutra for the first time. Just listening to the words of this sutra, actually there's a particular part, but just listening to the words of the sutra, he completely woke up. So, of course, depends on the capacity of each one. However, regardless of that, the point is that it's not rejected, you see. It's not rejected. People, maybe some people, they would listen to these words, they would listen to such sutra, and they would just, this is nonsense. This is nonsense. They will just dismiss it. Just dismiss it. Completely reject. This is nonsense. Others don't. Understanding or not understanding, more, less, but there's something there. They recognize. They recognize that there's some kind of value. They recognize that there's some kind of wisdom there. And why? Why is that? Why is that? The Buddha explains that here. Because they have planted good roots. Good roots. Not just with one Buddha, two Buddhas, three Buddhas, but many Buddhas. So we have to understand what this means. What means good roots? Good roots. So this has to do, there's that very famous there's that very famous gatha, that very famous 4 lines, which many people have heard. It just unfortunately is very poorly translated, but I'm sure all of you have heard it. The common way is, do no harm, cultivate virtue, tame your mind. This is the Buddha's teachings, right? I'm sure pretty much all of you have heard or read these 4 lines here and there, right? Do no harm, cultivate virtue, tame your mind. This is the Buddha's teaching. So this is actually a 4 line. This is a gatha that comes from the Dhammapada. It's Dhammapada verse 183, if I'm not mistaken. And unfortunately, it is horribly translated. Horribly. It's such a bad translation that it creates so much misunderstanding. So, do no harm, cultivate virtue. This is completely, tame your mind. This is completely wrong translation of the Pali, because this text is original in Pali. And the translation is very biased, is very judgmental actually. Because when you say do no harm, when you're translating do no harm, that becomes like, what does that mean? When you say cultivate virtue, what means virtue? Virtue, if you just hear the word virtue, that's relative. Because, what's virtuous for one person, maybe it's not virtuous for another person. What's virtuous in one country, maybe it's not virtue on another country. These are relative, judgmental terms. And it's not the really original meaning of the Pali. I've actually studied translation works of Pali scholars that have translated that have done Pali linguistic studies of the Dhammapada to clarify this, because for many years this translation of this gatha had bothered me. It didn't sound right, and I did a lot of research on that, and so the translation is very biased. Okay, so the Pali words really translated for this gatha, it would read differently. It would read like this: cultivate the wholesome, abandon the unwholesome, purify your mind. This is the Buddha teaching. So that's the literal, precise translation of these four lines. Do the wholesome, or cultivate the wholesome, abandon the unwholesome, purify your mind. This is the Buddha's teaching. So in Pali, I don't have actually here the notes for that, but the Pali word that is used, that is normally translated as tame your mind, it's very much biased by a lot of these controlling the mind kind of Buddhist or kind of Hinayana kind of teachings. But the actual literal meaning of the Pali word is purify. And the first 2 is connected with wholesome and unwholesome. And that's connected with this. Good roots. Good root. Which means good roots? Good roots means cultivate the wholesome. Cultivate the wholesome. Now, in the Buddhist teaching, cultivate the wholesome has a very specific meaning. It's not just something that we have some kind of ideas, We think we know. We think we know this is good and this is bad. This is judgment. This is just judgment. It's just conceptual judgment. The cultivate the wholesome is very specific. So I have here, just to give you, I'm not going to go into much detail about that, but just so you have an overview, you have an understanding. So there's a couple of different lists from this, depending on which Abhidharma you look for. So I'm giving you this list. This comes from Asanga, from Asanga's Abhidharma, because Vasubandhu's Abhidharma there's a slight differences. It's not much big, but a little bit. This is from Asanga's Abhidharma. So what means cultivate the wholesome? What means to plant good roots? So according to Asanga, means to cultivate first confidence in the Dharma, trust in the Dharma, confidence in the Buddha's teaching. That's the first one, wholesome root. Second one means respect, the attitude, inner attitude of respect, of being respectful. In particular, to be respectful to the three jewels, to be respectful to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. But in general, to be respectful. The third one is modesty. Modesty. I often use the term simplicity. You know, I teach a lot about simplicity. I write a lot about simplicity. I talk about simplicity all the time. That's my way of expressing this principle. Because modesty, maybe these days people have kind of sounds almost like an old word, you know, old-fashioned. But it is this principle of simplicity. Then it's absence of greed. Absence of greed. So we have to be very careful here. The way this is listed in the Abhidharma, in Asanga's Abhidharma, is really like this, is absence of greed. No grasping. No grasping. It is not a doing, you see, it's a non-doing. The next one is absence of hate. Absence of hate. To abandon hate. That's cultivating the wholesome. Huh? Letting go of aversion, letting go of rejecting. So once we have these two, absence of greed, absence of hate, this is like, you know, in Hatha Yoga, we speak of not accepting, not rejecting. To be beyond accepting and rejecting. It's connected, it's this, you see, absence of greed, absence of hate. Not accepting, not rejecting. Not clinging, not grasping, not pushing away. Then the next one is absence of delusion. Absence of delusion. So absence of delusion is something that is cultivated by how? By developing wisdom. Huh? When we develop wisdom, we are cultivating we are cultivating absence of delusion. Then the next one is diligence in virtue. So now what means diligence in virtue? Diligence in virtue means diligence in this. To be diligent in this. To be diligent towards the Dharma. To be diligent towards the practice. To be diligent towards these wholesome roots. And then the next one is vigilance. Vigilance, we can also say mindfulness. Just to be aware. Not to be always distracted. Not to be always chasing after distractions. Chasing after conceptual thoughts. Chasing after all this kind of confusion. Be vigilant, be aware, be present. Just being present. In Hatha Yoga, we just say more like this. Be present, be present. It's more or less the same, we can say. Then the next one is equanimity. Equanimity. What means equanimity? Means non-judgment. Means to cultivate a mind that is vast and wide and not always discriminating. Discriminating and judging, discriminating and judging, discriminating and judging. Equanimity. Equanimity is a good root. Then finally, the last one in the list here is non-violence. Non-violence. Ahimsa. Non-violence. Non-violence means many things. Non-violence means, at a more gross level, it means not to not to hurt other living beings, physically or mentally, like this, non-violence. It's just the gross form of violence. But it's not just that, you see, because violence is rooted on control. Control is the root of violence, the need to control. When the mind is very much involved in self-clinging, when the mind is very much involved in self-grasping, it needs to control. It needs to control itself, it needs to control the world, it needs to control life, it needs to control other people. And that control, that need to control, this is the root of violence. In the beginning, it could just be a need to control, and then maybe we manipulate a little bit. Maybe we try to influence a little bit. We try to to kind of get our hand in there to kind of try to influence how things go. And if things don't go our way, we try to be more forceful. And then eventually, if we can't do it in a subtle way, maybe we just drop bombs, we just drop bombs. There you go. Now you're going to do what I want, or else I'm going to drop a bomb on your head, So, but all of this all comes from the need to control, the need to control. Need to control is the root of violence. So what means to cultivate non-violence? To cultivate non-violence means to kind of cultivate a mind that is free, that is letting go, is a kind of surrender, is a kind of, of letting go from grasping. Grasping to what? Grasping to outcomes, grasping to results, grasping to expectations. When we let go of grasping to expectations, grasping to results, then automatically violence falls. Do you understand that? Because violence is rooted on that. Violence is rooted on expectations, on judgment, on control. The moment we drop that, violence drops. That's it. All the violence in the world would just stop automatically if everybody would relax, relax a little bit, instead of trying to control everything and control everybody. Okay, so if we speak about what means good roots, these are good roots. This is the roots that the Buddha is talking about. So beings that have cultivated these good roots, not just with one Buddha, or two Buddhas, or three Buddhas, or five Buddhas, but they have planted good roots immeasurably, then they will always understand this teaching. No matter the time, no matter when, they will always understand it. So the Buddha here is pointing to something very, very important. We'll get there in a moment. Because the Buddha then says, the Tathagata knows and sees all people who hear these phrases, who hear these teachings, Subhuti, and have even a single thought of pure faith. Such living beings will thus obtain immeasurable blessings and virtues. There is another sutra, I think it's in the Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 lines, if I'm not mistaken, where in another conversation with Subhuti, the Buddha says to Subhuti, a bodhisattva who practices this perfection of wisdom for a day or aspires to do so for even a single moment is known to the Tathagatas. How much more so those who cultivate such thoughts every day? What future awaits those who know? What future awaits those known to the Tathagatas? Their future is that of Buddhahood, and no further rebirth in lesser realms, but only in the heavens and always in the presence of the Tathagatas. The sutra continues, this sutra now continues. Why? Why? Because those living beings no longer cling to the appearances of self, others, living beings or alive, nor to the appearances of dharmas or non-dharmas. So why is this so important? Why is this so precious? Why is this really the culmination of this perfection of wisdom? Because when a being understands this teaching, when a being understands this that is being taught here by the Buddha, then their minds are not clinging anymore. They're not clinging to self, they're not clinging to outer appearances, they're not clinging to others, to the duality of self and other, life, existence, appearance, dharmas, non-dharmas, being and being. None of that. There's no clinging to anything. There is no grasping at anything. And this non-grasping, it is really the essence of the perfection of wisdom. It is the essence of the total realization of the Buddha, of the Buddha mind. It is this total understanding, experience, realization, discovery at all levels of non-grasping. non-grasping. So what does this mean? Because Buddha says here, because those living beings no longer cling to the appearances of self, others, living beings, or alive, nor to the appearances of dharmas or non-dharmas. So this is very important to understand. So it is important to understand because this is pointing to the nature of emptiness. This is pointing to the nature of emptiness. What means not to perceive dharmas, not to perceive self and others, not to perceive others, not to perceive an external phenomena? Because in some translations of this sutra, that's actually how it's phrased. Not here, but there are other translations of this sutra that say that instead of saying living beings no longer cling to appearances of self and other, these other translations translate as no longer perceive self or others. So I think this translation as not clinging is a kind of interpretative translation. I think probably the most correct translation here would be really not perceive self, not perceive other. So we need to understand what does that mean, because maybe sometimes people understand that emptiness means that it's like nothing. Don't perceive others. Blank, Don't perceive self, don't perceive others, don't perceive phenomena. Just there, like a stone or something like that. And that's not the correct understanding, of course. So it's important to understand here what emptiness means. What emptiness means, because this is the meaning, or at least the beginning of understanding this. Emptiness does not mean non-existence. Emptiness means that there is knowledge of what is false, that what is false does not exist. But that which is true is also known. Okay, so this distinction is very important, very important. So for example, I have a note here on this part from a commentary on this sutra from the Indian master Kamalashila. So Kamalashila, on this point, he adds a note. He says, according to the highest truth, dharmas do not actually appear. Thus, there can be no perception of a dharma. And because they do not appear, they do not disappear. Thus, there can be no perception of a no dharma. This tells us to realize that dharmas have no self-nature. So, what does this mean? Dharmas don't actually appear. Dharmas don't appear because they are just a concept in our mind. They don't exist inside of the appearance. Just very roughly said right now, just in a very simple way. For example, if we look at an object, if we look at a car, for example, we see an appearance there. There's an object there. And we say that's a car. However, the car, it is a mere concept in our minds. We cannot find the car in that appearance. It is not there. It is not there. Chandrakirti has explained this in the famous sevenfold reasoning, where he says that the parts of the car are not the car. So if you look at a car and you go at each part of the doors and the tires and the wheels and the steering wheel and all these things, if you look at all these parts, you cannot find the car there. It's not to be found. And then he continues, but okay, so if you cannot find the car in those pieces, in all those pieces, then is the car something that is outside, separate from those pieces? Can you find the car outside of that appearance? No, also you cannot. You cannot speak or think or see or find a car outside of those parts. Okay, we can understand that. So maybe we can think that the car is somehow the container. The car is somehow the support, and then all those parts are contained in the car. So the car becomes the support or the container of all the pieces. Well, that's obviously easy to see. That's not true either. The car is not the support for the parts. Then we cannot say, okay, then the car does not depend on the parts. The car is something else. The car is independent from the parts. Also not true. Okay, then another option would be the car is then not the owner of the parts. The car is something that, the car is the owner of the parts. So the car is something that owns those parts, is the owner of the parts. There's something that is a car that is the owner of those pieces. Where is that car? We cannot find any such owner. Another option would be to say that the car is the shape of the parts. Obviously, that's also not the case. So finally, the last one would say that the car is all the pieces put together is the car. But if we do that, we go back to the first one, which is in all those pieces, we cannot find the car. So this is, of course, this is very brief. This explanation would take a lot longer to give properly, but just very briefly to point so you understand that when you search for the Dharma, what means Dharma? So Dharma here means phenomena, okay? Phenomena. When you look for the phenomena, for the Dharma, in the thing, you cannot find. You can't find it. That is emptiness. That is the emptiness of the car. The emptiness of the car. That thing, that whatever that is being perceived, doesn't just magically poof disappear. When emptiness is perceived, it doesn't mean that you become like a rock. It doesn't mean you become blank, like a black, total ignorant state. It just means that you recognize that the thing is not there. It's empty. So, but here is saying that the bodhisattva does not perceive dharmas or non-dharmas. So this is what it means, you see, because when normal sentient beings look at a car, they perceive a car. Okay, now this is very important to understand. What this means, when sentient beings when normal beings, normal mind, when they look at the car, they perceive a car. Someone with wisdom does not perceive a car. But that doesn't mean that they can't open the door, get in, turn on the engine, and drive the car. Do you get it? This is the fundamental difference. Sentient beings, they perceive a car. There's a car. Yes, that's a car. For sure, it's a car. It's a good car or it's a bad car, but it's a car. The bodhisattva or someone with wisdom that recognizes this principle does not perceive a car. But here it says, so do not perceive the appearances of dharmas or non-dharmas. So no car. So the bodhisattva does not perceive car, but also they don't perceive no car. Are you following me here? Both. They don't perceive car and they don't perceive no car. So they can still go to the car, open the door, sit, turn on the engine and drive. but they don't perceive car. This is what the Buddha is saying here, and that's what Kalamashila is saying as well. Because appearances do not appear, because they are not real. They are just an illusory concept, an illusory projection of the mind. They cannot be found anywhere. So they don't appear. If they don't appear, they can't disappear. They can't disappear. So because they can't disappear, you can't also perceive a no car. You can't perceive a no dharma. You see, now here we're starting to really get into to the headache part of this sutra, to the really, mind twist, to really go beyond the idea of emptiness. Because, as I said last time, this sutra truly is about the emptiness of emptiness, to go beyond emptiness. And that's really what it means. I have here another short note from a Chinese master on this part. That says, the non-existence of perceptions of dharmas. So listen to this. This is a very nice remark here by this Chinese master. He says, the non-existence of perceptions of dharmas makes it clear that dharmas do not exist. And thus, it eliminates our attachment to existence. So when we perceive that there is no car there is no car to be found in the car. The car is empty of car. Like I am empty of self, okay? Because that's indeed the most important in the beginning is I, me, me. I am empty of me. Self is empty of self. So the perception that these dharmas don't exist, like car or self, it eliminates our attachment to existence. And then he continues, the non-existence of perceptions of no dharmas makes it clear that dharmas do not exist. And thus it eliminates our attachment to non-existence. Because this is one of the great dangers or challenges in the path, is to cling to emptiness. To make emptiness be the number one thing. And this happens a lot, even in Buddhism this happens a lot sometimes. People get stuck on emptiness, even in the teaching level, Many teaching levels, it's just emptiness, 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 emptiness. The Buddha in this sutra is making this point very clear. We have to be very careful with this. Because emptiness is also empty of emptiness. Okay? So, where was I? So the sutra continues. Why? If those living beings' minds cling to appearances, that would be attachment to a self, others, living beings, and a life. If they cling to appearances of dharmas, that would be attachment to a self, others, living beings, and a life. Why? If they cling to the appearances of non-dharmas, that would be attachment to a self, others, living beings, and a life. Therefore, you should not cling to dharmas, you should not cling to non-dharmas. This is very direct here, very simple. Don't cling. Don't cling to things, don't cling to no things. Don't cling to existence, don't cling to non-existence. Don't cling to emptiness, don't cling to clarity. Don't cling to positive or negative. Don't cling to self, don't cling to no self. That's the main point. That's the main point. Because, you see, why is the word perception used here? Perceiving dharmas and perceiving non-dharmas. The moment we speak about perceiving, I perceive a car, for example. If I say it like this, I perceive a car, then there's an I, there's a self, there's a me that exists, that is able to perceive the car. If I say, there is no car, there is no car, then there is still a me, a self, that is perceiving no car. Okay? So you're always stuck on the same problem here. Grasping or clinging to appearance or grasping to non-appearance is same problem, because there's always a perceiver. There's always a perceiver. So it doesn't matter if it's a thing or a non-thing, if it's existence or emptiness. It's always dualistic. It's always dualistic. It's always based on self, perceiver. So, because fundamentally, outside this mind, outside the vastness of this mind, there are no dharmas. There are no objective phenomena. There are no objective phenomena that you can speak of, separate from mind itself. So, in that sense, we can say that this mind itself is the Dharma. This mind itself is the Dharma. It's the Buddha. This mind is everything. In fact, this mind is the Dharma, this mind is the Buddha, this mind is the Sangha. In truth. Outside of this Dharma, there is no other mind. So you can use this mind to understand that there is no mind, but you still have a mind. You can use this mind to understand that there is no mind, but then you still have a mind. So you can perceive that there's no car, but then you still drive the car. So then the Buddha continues. Because of this principle, the Tathagata always says, Bhikshus, you should all know that the Dharma I speak is like a raft. You must let go of dharmas, even more so let go of non-dharmas. Wow, this is an extraordinary statement. Extraordinary statement. So the Buddha says, I always say, this dharma that I speak is like a raft. You must let go of dharmas, even more so, you must let go of non-dharmas. Wow, this is truly excellent. So Buddha is saying basically here two things. The first thing he's saying is that the Dharma that he speaks is like a raft. Means you use a raft to cross a river. The raft is a tool. The raft is relative. The raft only has one purpose, to get you across. You can't cling to that either. We can't cling to the raft. The raft is always relative, and it depends, in some rivers, maybe you can just hop on a piece of wood and just go across. In some rivers, you need a kind of a sturdy raft. On some rivers, you need a power boat with a power engine. It really depends on the situation. The kind of raft that you will need will depend on the river. And that's what the Buddha is saying also here, that it's relative. All Dharma is relative. All of it. All spoken Dharma, all words, all teachings is all relative. All of this that the Buddha is teaching in the end, is relative. It has only one purpose. And in the end, all of that needs to be abandoned. Of course, in the beginning, practitioners need to learn the Dharma because it is their raft. But it's very good to understand from the beginning already as well that we can't also be attached to that. And this is something that happens a lot. And actually, it happens worse than that. People not only get attached to the Dharma, but they get attached to their Dharma. They get attached to the Dharma of my tradition, my Dharma tradition, my club, my Dharma lineage. They get really attached to that. And even worse, they even get attached to the container, to the form, the packaging. Because you see, As the Buddha has already explained, and as this sutra already explained several times during this sutra, the real Dharma is beyond words. The real authentic Dharma is formless. Formless. This sutra is the Dharma, and yet you can't pin it down. If you really try to pin down the Dharma of this sutra, you can't do it. You can't do it. Your mind can't really make something out of it. It is formless. The true Dharma is formless. So, in a way to guide beings, to guide sentient beings, we need to speak, we need to communicate, we need to talk, we need to find means to express, to apply the path. So, a kind of package, let's call it a packaging, a packaging is developed. Because if I want to give you tea, let's say I have this tea, I have this medicinal tea. It is this tea that can really heal all problems. But how can I give you this tea? If I try to put this tea in my hand and just give you the tea, it will be very difficult, it's quite hard, to give you tea in the hand. So, maybe I get a cup or a bottle of some sort and I put the tea in the bottle and then I say, here, now you can drink this tea. The tea itself doesn't care. You see, the tea, the function of the tea itself is independent from the packaging, is independent from the cup. The cup is only a means of carrying it through, relatively speaking. This is the form. This is what I sometimes call the packaging, the outer packaging of the Dharma, which changes. It changes always. It changes from time to time, from culture to culture, from country to country. Indian Buddhism was Indian Buddhism. It had its specific packaging, and even the packaging of Indian Buddhism always changed over history, over time. And then when Buddhism migrated to other countries, it took another packaging. There's the Chinese packaging, the Japanese packaging, the Tibetan packaging, the Korean packaging, the Thai packaging, there's many different kinds of packagings. But the Dharma, and we need to distinguish this, because many people today, they don't distinguish this. And they even get more attached to the outer form. They get more attached to the cup. They care more about the cup than they care about the tea. And this is true. You can just look yourselves and you can understand that what I'm saying is true. There's so much fixation about the cup, all these wonderful, beautiful, that cup is so beautiful, extraordinary cup. Forget about the cup. Drink the tea. Drink the tea. Heal your sickness. Drink the tea. Heal your sickness. And when your sickness is healed, throw away the tea, throw away the cup. You don't need it anymore. That's the point. This is what the Buddha is saying here. Dharma, I speak, is like a raft. Please, this is so important, because if we don't understand this, we are always clinging to outer Dharma. We are always clinging to outer forms of Dharma. We are clinging to cultural packaging. We are clinging to words. We are clinging to specific manifestations of Dharma. And if we do that, we don't even get to the tea, we don't even go beyond the surface. And this is a big obstacle sometimes. Many times I see this happening. This is not very good. So the Buddha is speaking here clearly. It's like a raft. Release clinging. Just understand, try to understand the main principle, the main point, the real point of the Dharma. So then the Buddha continues. You must let go of dharmas, even more so let go of non-dharmas. So, basically what the Buddha is saying here is you must let go of the perceptions of both reality and unreality. Meaning that any idea that things are real, you must let go. But then if you have the idea that things are unreal, also that you must let go. Sometimes I say like this, sometimes, some time ago, there was this conversation about what is real What is unreal? And I just said a good example for that would be like this, would be just like a story like this. You know, if you ask me, what is real? I would say the tree in the garden. And if you'd ask me, okay, so what is unreal? I would say the tree in the garden. Do you understand? This is the point. What is real? The tree in the garden. What is unreal? The tree in the garden. This is what the Buddha is saying here. We must let go of clinging to reality, or perceptions of reality, but also we must not cling to perception of non-reality, of unreality. Both these we must let go. So in particular, the Buddha refers to, three kinds of aspects of things, which are called the dharmas of self, meaning self, me, I. This is the first one. Second one is outer phenomena, so the dharma of dharmas. And then finally, there's the dharma of emptiness. So the way the Buddha taught the dharma was very specific for these three dharmas. So there's three dharmas, okay? The dharma of self, the dharma of dharmas, phenomena, and the dharma of emptiness. So the Buddha taught three cycles of teaching, right? Everybody probably knows this, the three turnings. The Buddha taught these three cycles for these dharmas, for these three dharmas. So with the first teaching, the first set of teachings, the Buddha taught that self is empty. Self is empty. So that breaks the clinging to the dharma of self. Self is empty. That's the first set, first teaching, first turning. Then the Buddha continued, second turning. It said that dharmas are also empty, meaning all phenomena are also empty. So first, self is empty. Second, all dharmas are empty. Third turning, emptiness is also empty. Don't cling to unreality. Don't cling to emptiness. And that is why in the third turning teachings, the Buddha taught about Buddha nature. Buddha nature is the main topic. Or depending on the sutras, but anyway, that's the point. Because emptiness is also empty. So this does not leave us anything to grasp. It doesn't leave us any room to hold on to anything, to grasp to nothing at all, not to being or non-being. This is the true path of the Mahayana, the true path of the Buddha. Okay, next chapter, 7. Chapter 7. Nothing attained, nothing spoken. So, this is the title. Nothing attained, nothing spoken. So it starts. Subhuti, what do you think? Did Tathagata attain enlightened awakening, Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi? Did the Tathagata attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi? Did the Tathagata speak any Dharma? These very, very challenging questions. Very challenging questions. The Buddha is really pressing Subhuti. So what is the point of this question? What is the point of this question? The point of this question is, so did the Tathagata attain awakening? You see, if we say that the Buddha attained awakening, then we are grasping to the existence of a Buddha that exists and that attained something that is called awakening that exists. We're back again to the same point. We're grasping at dharmas. We are grasping at the dharma called Buddha, a phenomena called Buddha. We are grasping at the phenomena called awakening. If we grasp at the phenomena Buddha and the phenomena awakening, then we didn't understand. And if the Buddha that appeared it's not the real Buddha, then how can we say that he taught any Dharma? You see, that's the real point. See, if we there is no ultimate, that's the thing. There is no ultimate Dharma. Sometimes we can say, this is the ultimate Dharma. This is and some people debate these things. Some people discuss these things, which Dharma is the definitive Dharma and which Dharma is the provisional Dharma. And this is all pointless discussion. There is no single spoken Dharma that is definitive, not even one. Everything that is spoken is already broken Dharma. Every single word that is spoken is broken Dharma, immediately, right away, from the beginning. True Dharma cannot be spoken, cannot be put into words of any kind. So in that sense, all Dharma teachings, all Dharma words are provisional or relative in that sense. So we should not become attached too much to all these things, to become too kind of literal about such things. So then how does it go? So Subhuti answered, as I understand what the Buddha has said, there is no predetermined Dharma called Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, and there are not any predetermined Dharmas which the Tathagata could speak. You see, so that's what Subhuti just answered. He says, as I understand, there are no fixed, predetermined dharmas. There is no dharma that can be called awakening, Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. We say the Buddha attained Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. So what's that? What's that? Where is that? How can we find that? Which kind of thing is that? What is it made of? Where does it exist? Because we're making it into a thing. We cannot make that into an existent Dharma. That's what Subhuti is saying. There is no predetermined Dharma called Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. And so there are no truly existent Dharmas which the Tathagata could speak. Because it's all just does. It is all just does. Like I said in the last teaching, does, doesn't, does, as it is. Everything becomes just relative. I've added here to clarification, I've added a note, a short quotation from the Lotus Sutra that is relevant here. There's a passage in the Lotus Sutra that says, capacities are deep or shallow. Some people are diligent while others are lazy. The dharmas that are taught to them are tailored to their abilities. Thus, dharmas have no fixed form. Delusion and enlightenment are far apart. Before we are enlightened, it seems as if nothing is realized. After we are enlightened, it seems as if something is realized. But realizing something and not realizing something are both delusions. As long as we remain unattached, we follow the middle path. How then can we talk about the Dharma? It's very profound. This links right with this part of the sutra. So, if we speak about something realized or something not realized, then we're always falling into one side or another. We're always grasping to something. And then we are not following the middle way. And if we don't follow the middle way, we cannot really truly break free. We cannot really truly discover what is suchness, doesness, thatness, the ultimate nature of reality. Then the sutra continues. Why? All the Dharma which the Tathagata has spoken can neither be clung to nor spoken of. It is neither Dharma nor non-Dharma. I'm not sure if you have a headache already by now or not, but get ready because we're going to continue a bit more. So, all the Dharma that the Tathagata has spoken of can neither be clung to nor spoken of. It is neither Dharma nor non-Dharma. You have to understand that the purpose here, the purpose of the diamond, the purpose of this sutra, it's not to establish a philosophical view. And I am not trying to teach you philosophy here. I'm not trying to teach you any philosophy at all. I am just trying to follow here what the Buddha is trying to point to, what this sutra is trying to point to. Beyond grasping, beyond clinging, beyond holding on to anything at all. The great problem here, and this is the special feature of this sutra, is that when we say don't grasp to anything, don't hold to anything, when people learn a little bit about Dharma, and when people develop a little bit of knowledge, when they hear such things, don't cling to anything, don't hold on to anything, the natural tendency is a kind of rejection, is a kind of rejection of appearances, is a kind of this thing of everything is illusory, nothing is real. And in this attitude of nothing is real, there's a kind of pushing away, there's a kind of a gap is made, a kind of gap. And the mind starts to kind of grasp a little bit to this everything is unreal. And what this sutra is trying to do is to balance that out, to break you free from that misunderstanding. That's why I said, what is real? The tree in the garden. What is unreal? The tree in the garden. This is the meaning here. This is the meaning here. We cannot grasp to any of these two sides. Or else we fall into extreme, as we're going to see a bit later in this sutra. So it says, why all the Dharma which the Tathagata has spoken can neither be clung to nor spoken of. It is neither Dharma nor non-Dharma. So here we are getting to a very important part of the sutra, which is very important. Because at this point, Subhuti now is starting to get into a bind that we will see better, in a moment. Subhuti is getting into a bind. Subhuti is getting into a problem. Because in the beginning, it seemed like Subhuti has gotten it, right? And you remember when I taught the first chapter, like Subhuti got it. He got it. He saw the Buddha acting in complete clarity in that state, and he was so impressed. He got it. But did he? Did he really get it? And now that's what we're getting to. You see, because the Diamond in this sutra, there's a kind of a twitch happening here, which is a guiding tool for everyone, in fact. So the problem here is what? The problem is that Subhuti, you see, and that's what we are going to discover right now in the next verse. Subhuti is an arhat. Subhuti is an arhat. Subhuti has attained the level of arhat. You have to understand this. Subhuti is not just any disciple of the Buddha. Subhuti actually is, at this point, in the level of arhat. And as such, he does have an understanding of emptiness, of self. He recognizes, he realizes this. And so far, all this understanding Subhuti has had is connected to his realization of emptiness, to his understanding and realization of emptiness, which has been coming through from the beginning. And from the beginning, the Buddha has been trying to kind of nudge him off, you see, because Subhuti is on that level. So now he's on a bind, because The Buddha asks him this. You see, these questions the Buddha asks him in this chapter. These are leading questions. In court it would be that these are leading questions. These are leading questions. The Buddha is asking him. So, did the Buddha attain enlightenment? Did the Buddha taught Dharma? So, okay, you've understood emptiness. So, did I attain enlightenment? Did I taught Dharma? And the Buddha says, no. I understand emptiness. So no. I cannot say that there's a Buddha. I cannot say that there's a Dharma. I cannot say that the Buddha has attained enlightenment because, Buddha is empty, enlightenment is empty, Dharma is empty. Subhuti gets that. Subhuti understood this. But now he has a bind because even though he understood all this, he's sitting there. You see, he's sitting there. He's sitting there in front of the Buddha talking to him. You see, that's the bind. That's the bind Subhuti finds himself right now in this point. That's what the Buddha is confronting him with. The Buddha has been leading him, And after you get the teachings on this sutra, like I'm teaching you now, and if you go back later and you read the sutra, if after all the teachings on this sutra, if you go back and just read the sutra from the beginning, you probably read it in a very different light than you would have done before, because now you will be able to see this. You'll be able to see how the Buddha has been leading Subhuti, into a trap almost. Because now he's caught there. Yeah, I get it. I saw the emptiness. I saw you move in emptiness. I understand what you're saying, that, Dharma is empty, Buddha is empty, enlightenment is empty. But now what? You're there, we're talking to each other. So now it continues. Why is that so? All the worthy ones and sages are different because of unconditioned dharmas. So here, basically, what Subhuti is saying is that this translation is not there are different translations of this sutra, and is all translations. Some translations have weaknesses and strengths, so it's always a kind of a balance. In other translations of this sutra, it says more clearly. It says that Subhuti here says that the Buddhas and the sages, they arise from the unconditioned. They arise from the uncreated. Or in other words, the Buddhas arise from emptiness. So you have to understand that this is Subhuti speaking. This is Subhuti speaking. So it makes sense to you. So why all the Dharma which Tathagata has spoken can either be clung to or spoken of. It is neither Dharma nor non-Dharma. Why? Because all the Buddhas arise from emptiness. Okay, that's another way to say what it says here. So this is Subhuti speaking. This is not the Buddha speaking. This is not the Buddha speaking. This is very important to understand. This is Subhuti's view. So Subhuti's view is Buddha arises from the unborn. Buddha arises from the uncreated. Buddha arises from emptiness. Because again, Subhuti is an arhat. That is his view. That is his view. And this is not correct. This view, Buddha is the unconditioned. Buddha is the unborn. Buddha is the emptiness. This is not correct. And in the next chapter, the Buddha will correct that. The Buddha will now the Buddha has got him. The Buddha has brought him right to this point of making it outright. And now the Buddha is going to correct that. Now the Buddha is going to turn his mind into the right direction. So that's the last chapter I'll do today. Chapter 8. We will finish with chapter 8. So next chapter 8. So the title of chapter 8 is They Arise from Dharma. So now this is where the Buddha is going to correct Subhuti. He's going to correct Subhuti's view and the view of everyone studying this sutra, hopefully, I think. So Buddha says, Subhuti, what do you think? If a person gave as a gift the 7 kinds of precious gems in quantity enough to fill up a threefold great thousand world system, would such a person obtain many blessings and virtues? The Buddha is just kind of, asking now a question. This is not a question, because the Buddha was very, very sneaky, very sneaky. He's always trying to get you somehow. There's no innocent questions coming from there, never, There's always a trap of some kind. So, Subhuti, what do you think? If a person gave as a gift of 7 kinds of precious gems to fill up all the universe or whatever, some big measure, would such a person obtain many blessings and virtues? And Subhuti said, very many, world-honored one, very many. Why? These blessings and virtues do not refer to the essential nature of blessings and virtues. Therefore, the Tathagata says there are many blessings and virtues. If, on the other hand, a person were to accept and uphold even so few as 4-line verse from this sutra and speak them for others, this person's blessings would surpass the blessings of the individual named above. So the Buddha here is just starting to make his point. Okay, so the first point is, if someone makes great generosity, like the Buddha described here, something immeasurable, would they get a lot of virtues from that? Yes, sure, but they are relative results. Relative. If somebody practices a lot of generosity by, a great philanthropist, he gives a lot of money to charities and this and that. But in doing all of this generosity, giving all this money to charities, this person is clinging to self, they're clinging to other. They're clinging to the true existence of self and other and generosity. If they're doing this is relative. Maybe they can get good karma. And in future life, they get good results from that. And they get some kind of, prosperity and things like that. But this doesn't bring awakening. This does not bring enlightenment. It's very important to understand. It does. That's what the Buddha is saying here. It doesn't. Because the Buddha continues, if on the other hand, a person were to accept and uphold even just 4 lines of this sutra, then this person's blessings would surpass the blessings of the other one. Meaning that to just understand, to just read and understand just 4 lines of this sutra, it's more merit, it is more virtuous than giving all the wealth in the world to the whole universe. That's literally what the Buddha is saying here. The Buddha is saying here is that awakening does not come from all these actions that are done based on self and other. Awakening comes from wisdom. Wisdom is the true merit. Wisdom is the true attainment of merit. So results of outer actions result in outer results, but not wisdom. And results of inner wisdom, such as studying, reflecting, reading the sutras, meditating, reciting this, or studying or listening to this kind of teaching, this brings wisdom. Outer offerings cannot bring awakening. Only wisdom can. So that's really the point that the Buddha first is trying to make. The Buddha is not done yet. That's the first point. What is this doing right now? This is, first of all, is breaking, the extremist view that there is nothing to be done. You see, Dharma teachers are very complicated creatures, Sometimes, we're saying nothing to be done, nothing to do, nothing to be done, nothing to be attained. The nature of mind is beyond cause and condition. The nature of mind is beyond any doing. There is nothing that you can do as a person to attain or to discover the nature of your mind, because your person is illusory. Your person is illusory, so that illusion, that illusory self, what can the illusory self do to discover that which is unconditioned? Nothing. We say like this. But then people get attached to that. They get attached to that thing. So we also have to say, however, if you don't study, if you don't get teachings, if you don't meditate, if you don't develop your wisdom, you won't get it. Yeah. So we're always making. There was I forget now who it was. There was I forget his name. There was an Indian master that said. Everything the Buddha says, he denies it later, or he contradicts later. Everything the Buddha says, he contradicts later. Like this. It's really important to really look in our minds, to look in how we understand Dharma. So then it continues. So another way to comment on this, and I have here a small note from a commentary on this sutra, a commentary on this part actually, a commentary on this verse from Asanga. On Asanga's commentary, Asanga says that learning in the sense of learning the Dharma, learning and teaching others are not without merit. Asanga says like this. This is just listen attentively. Asanga says, learning and teaching others is not without merit. So it has merit. Awakening, however, does not depend on merit. It rather depends on this, on learning and teaching. Again, this is this dance. So learning and teaching others are not without merit. So when it means learning, practicing, learning the Dharma, practicing the Dharma, all these things. So, and teaching others. So learning and teaching are not without merit. Awakening, however, does not depend on merit. It depends on learning and teaching. Okay, so this is how Asanga commented on this particular line of this verse. So the Buddha continues now. The Buddha says, and now this is really the kind of the clenching point here. And he says, why Subhuti? All Buddhas and their Dharma of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi come from this sutra. Subhuti, by this I mean that the Buddha and the Dharma are not the Buddha and the Dharma. So, in the previous chapter, Subhuti said, if you remember, the Buddha comes from the emptiness. The Buddha comes from the uncreated. The Buddha comes from the unborn. Right? That was Subhuti's view. That was Subhuti's idea. And the Buddha now is saying, no, the Buddha comes from this sutra. What means the Buddha comes from this sutra? It doesn't mean it comes from these words. It means the Buddha comes from this wisdom. The Buddha comes from this wisdom. Not just from emptiness. Not just from emptiness. The Buddha comes from this wisdom. So this is correcting that statement that Subhuti made in the last chapter. Buddhas are not just born from emptiness. So when the Buddha says here, Buddhas come from this sutra here, it means the nature, suchness, doesness, thatness. Like I explained in the first teaching, I told you, in this sutra, does is the key word, doesness. Buddhas come from doesness. Doesness is this sutra. This sutra is doesness. So this sutra itself, of course, refers to the nature of mind, beyond all extremes. So it doesn't mean the word, it means wisdom. And the Buddha says, by this I mean that the Buddha and the Dharma are not the Buddha and the Dharma. That means that because the Buddha that was there speaking this sutra, is not the real Buddha. And the words that the Buddha is speaking is not the real Dharma. That's the point, you see. That's the point. If we think that the Buddha was that person, that body, Siddhartha Gautama, that was walking around, if we think that's the Buddha, then we miss the point. That's not the real Buddha. The same way, the words that he spoke, this is not the real Dharma. So, conventionally, we say the Buddha and the Dharma, but that's only conventionally. So the Buddha is saying here that the Buddha, it does not arise from emptiness alone. The Buddha arises from wisdom. Wisdom is everything. The ultimate nature of the mind is inseparable. Is the totality, is the great totality. You cannot just fall into one side of being or non-being, emptiness or clarity. The great totality. You cannot reject anything. If you remember, in one of the first chapters of this sutra, the Buddha says, when the Bodhisattva sees that appearances are non-appearances, so that again is the same point. When they see that there's no car there, but they can still walk into the car, turn on the key, and drive it. So this understanding, and finally this wisdom, this realization, this total realization of what this means, that is where Buddhas come from. That is where Buddhas come from. Cannot separate, cannot take this. Sometimes, we give teachings on the unborn. We give teachings on the non-causal, beyond cause, beyond effect. Beyond cause, beyond effect. Emptiness. That's to counter something. It's like an antidote. It's like something. But sometimes, we say, you have to study this, practice this, do that. But you can't cling to either side. If you believe, that's why I say many times, if you believe that is by chanting some mantras that you're going to get enlightened, good luck. Good luck. Not going to happen. I assure you, not going to happen. You can burn your fingers. You can make your mala disappear to nothing, It's not going to do it. Because awakening does not come from that. Because it is already here. It is just this. But it is just this to understand what it means. When I say awakening, the nature of the mind is just this. But to understand just this, what that actually means, you need to release all grasping. You need to release totally all grasping to just understand truly what that means. And you cannot make it. You cannot make it. You cannot maintain it. You cannot. Some people say that I try to maintain Rigpa. I try to maintain awareness. If you try to maintain Rigpa, that is not Rigpa. For sure. You cannot maintain it. While there is a perceiver, that's not it. While there is somebody to maintain something, while there is somebody that feels that it has to do something, that it has to control something, that it has to maintain something, sustain something, and that there is something to be sustained, there is something to be maintained, then that's not it. That's not it. When I say it's just this, in saying it's just this, I'm referring to doesness, to thisness. And there is no subject and object in this, in doesness. There is no appearance of dharmas and there is no disappearance of dharmas. There is no appearance of cars and there is no disappearance of cars. It is just this. That is the great meaning of this sutra, which is not different from the Dzogchen teachings. It's not different. It's the same. It's the same. You know, sometimes people have this understanding that there's all these different things, but there's not. The Buddha only taught one thing. The Buddha only taught one thing. You know, people make all kinds of divisions, but that's just confusion. Just in different kind of, you know, biases that the mind assumes. And the Buddha just taught one thing. The Buddha only taught one thing, and it's this. This. And this is not different from Hatha Yoga. This is not different from Mahamudra. This is not different from Zen. This is not, it's this, always just the same. It's this. What is this? This. This. Just this. Just this. Don't cling to this or to that. Abide. Find the middle point. When there's no perceiver, no perceived, or absence of perceiving, you know? Nothing to maintain, nothing to support, nothing to cultivate, nothing to attain, no distraction or absence of distraction. If we are perceiving distraction and absence of distraction, then who is that perceives distraction? Who is that perceives absence of distraction? We must investigate, we must look, because then we are still clinging to a self. We are still clinging to the perceiver. We are still clinging to the observer. We are still clinging to self, fundamentally, actually. So that's not it. So when I say it's just this, we need to really come to the discovery what it means. It's this. Because when I say it's this, I mean it really literally, actually. This is not some kind of, you know, when I say it's just this, I'm not making some kind of, you know, Zen koan, you know, mysterious kind of thing for you to figure out. I actually mean it really literally. I really mean it really literally. It is just this. The problem is how you understand and how you perceive what is this. If you perceive these as phenomena, windows and houses and cars and people, then you are living in duality. You are living in confusion. If you perceive that it's not cars, not people, not houses, not cups, not tables, then also it's not that yet. Because then you are clinging to the absence of the phenomena. When both of these are relaxed into great openness, great spaciousness, into great clarity, then it's just this. So, in the same sutra, in this sutra, the Diamond Sutra, later on in this sutra, there's a statement by the Buddha that is really actually relevant here at this point. It says, the Buddha says like this: in this name there is no meaning. For this meaning there is no name. The wise find it in their minds. The foolish seek external sounds. So this is kind of, we can say that this summarizes a little bit this point. So, in this name, there is no meaning. What it means like this. In this name, like the name Buddha, the name Buddha, or the name, you know, sentient being, or the name car, whatever. But let's say Buddha, you know. In this name, in the name Buddha, there is no meaning. For the actual meaning of what is Buddha, there is no name. You can't give it a name. The wise find it in their minds. So if you understand what the Dharma is all about, we must resolve the meaning of this in our minds. It's only there. The mind is the Buddha. There is no Buddha outside the mind. This is repeated again and again and again in so many sutras and tantras and commentaries and so on. The mind is the Buddha. There is no Buddha to be found outside the mind. So the Buddha here says, the wise find it in their minds. The foolish seek it in external sounds, meaning the foolish are seeking for the Buddha, are seeking for the meaning of the Buddha in the words, in the outer forms, into the religious packaging, into the rituals, into all these kind of external forms. People that are searching for Buddhahood in all these things, they are fools. They don't understand even a little of the Buddha's teaching. They truly don't. The Buddha has repeated this again and again and again and again and again, and still people still do it. It's incredible, quite incredible actually. The Buddha says it again and again. The Buddha is in your mind. Search there. Search there. Search there. All great masters, all realized yogis, teachers, they're always repeating again and again and again. Stop deluding yourself, searching outwardly for what is in your mind, for what is the nature of your mind. You cannot find it out there. You won't find it in outer forms. You won't find it in sounds, words, structures, conceptual ideas, philosophies. You won't. It is just in the mind. And this is what needs to be resolved. And yet, we need to cultivate the roots of the wholesome virtues to come to develop this wisdom that can even start to understand the meaning of this. And this bind, you see, this is the bind that Subhuti was at this point. This bind. And this is the bind that probably, many practitioners will find themselves in, hopefully. It's a good bind to be in. Because when you get to this bind, it means that you are starting to get somewhere. Okay? If you don't get to this bind, if you don't get to this conflict, to this paradox, then it means that you're still too attached too much to one side or another. When we get to this paradox, it's a good sign. Okay, it's a good sign. It's a sign we are actually getting somewhere. And then the mind goes like, I don't understand. And this is good. This is good. This is good. And now we need to try to work that out. And through wisdom, through cultivating these roots, especially through meditation, and listening to these teachings, and studying these kind of teachings, then the mind will mature and will come to be able to understand, to realize, to see what this really means, what is the truth of this.